is Dr. Joanne, and I work at the National Institute of Education at Nanyang Technological University. And I would really like to thank Jalta, Mr. Silva, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Professor Hari again, and also the pleasure of meeting Keith Tong, right, at this event. And it's been a wonderful time so far of interaction. I'd also like to thank Marshall Cavendish really for sponsoring this event and for embracing everything that we're trying to do as teachers, as parents, right, with young children. So let me begin, if I could, yeah? In this presentation, I offer the view that to develop children as fluent and interested readers in English, we have to move beyond words. If I were to ask the question, what do you understand by the word reading? Many of us will think of reading as an essential skill for academic success. For if children cannot read, they cannot learn and will not do well in schools. Many of us will associate reading with words like information, books, learning. But in my presentation today, I offer the view that reading could be associated as well with enjoyment, pleasure, joy in the minds of our children. To help us understand approaches to teaching reading available to us as parents and teachers, we know that there are two dominant approaches. One that focuses on children decoding words or sounding out words and doing worksheets. The second is when children make connections with what they are reading by engaging in conversations or talk. The first approach, often called a phonics or discrete approach to teaching reading, and the second often identified as whole language approach to teaching reading. The distinct difference between both approaches is that with the first, we focus on ensuring that children can identify words by sight and sounding out, and the second by encouraging understanding or comprehension to conversations or talk. So let's take a look at the first one. The first approach is familiar to most of us, and that makes a great deal of sense. As an approach, children are asked to retain in their working memory the appearance of patterns, whether sight or sound, in order to recognize more words. To add reading tests often mirror these same skills of word identification and pattern formation. Still, as many in this room know, there are limitations in this approach. If children have the memory capacity to store discrete words in order to formulate patterns for later recognition, children may not comprehend always or understand what they're able to identify. And as teachers, some of us probably have experienced this or witnessed this. As an alternative, whole language approaches propose to engage children in reading authentic or real literature. That is, literature written for the primary purpose of a child's enjoyment. With whole language approaches, children select what they want to read and how often. Conversations during or after reading are focused on children engaging with characters in the story, unusual events, visuals, and not only get them thinking, but also get them laughing. Consequently, when the focus of reading is on the story, children often want to read. By taking the pressure off word identification and sounding each word correctly, children are put at ease to enjoy the reading experience that they are in control of. The research then is encouraging us to consider whole language approaches that engage children beyond words to develop a love for reading in children. It seems clear that each approach records shortcomings that as parents and teachers we are concerned about. With the use of whole language approaches alone, children may not do as well in reading tests, which they need for academic success. With phonics or discrete approaches alone, children may not do well in the short term, but do not wish to read for leisure or engage with it throughout their lives. Both of which, I argue, are very necessary for children to get a head start in life, to lead productive, mentally active lives as they grow into adulthood and mature in years. As such, a balance of both approaches is advocated. If children are already receiving phonics-based reading lessons in schools, then at home as parents, they will benefit by giving children whole language reading experiences. If schools are only providing children with phonics-based reading lessons, then introducing whole language reading experiences will broaden children's experiences with reading. So our question here today is, what can we do to encourage a love of reading in children even as they learn discrete reading skills? I propose to widen children's reading experiences by including whole language reading experiences that are social and collaborative. Create reading experiences where children select authentic, high-quality literature written for children's enjoyment from libraries or from bookshops. These books are read together or shared with members of a child's community, parents, teachers, uncles, aunties, siblings, cousins, and friends. From these experiences, children have wonderful memories of reading together with important members of the village that surrounds them, and that they will grow with. In these reading experiences, children themselves sharing their own views, learning from those closest to them, or from those they choose to bond with over literature that edifies. By complementing whole language approaches with phonics reading approaches, we are expanding the experiences that children have with books, from solitary to social experiences. It is from here that children learn to read socially, to understand how reading can be a leisure activity, and how reading builds bonds between parents, teachers, siblings, and their friends. As children engage with their community over books, they will use the English as the target language to be learned because the story is in English, and the shared experience is with someone who speaks English. More importantly, they get to share their opinions and talk about stories with phonics-based approaches that they do not get hold of. To add, as more reading tests widen test questions, to include questions requiring children to think and give their opinions, whole language approaches become useful even for test requirements. The most compelling argument, I would say, for us as teachers and parents to complement phonics approaches with reading experiences that approach reading from a whole language perspective is that children are situated as intelligent and active, and I would argue quite magical, whose perspectives and opinions the world really needs to hear. With whole language approaches, children select, lead, and are encouraged to control the reading experience. And what we are doing through whole language experience is just to give them that space to find themselves. One of the key attributes of whole language approaches is that children get to explore the huge world of literature. There is just so much being published every day. I cannot just understate this. Libraries often keep stock of new publications that reflect ways of thinking and being that distinguish children of today from any other generation. While some stories remain classics, it should not limit the exposure children get to the values that should direct life as a 21st century multicultural citizen of the world. And it is these stories that we want children to have exposure to. In short, children's literature includes fiction, that is stories, and non-fiction, that's information, to explore their identities, their interests, and perhaps even develop aspirations. If they do not get to do this in reading lessons in schools, where texts are written to test word and sound recognition, then they should have the opportunity to explore it with us as parents and teachers at home. Just let me add current understandings to children's literature as lenses. Current literature on the current research on the kinds of literature that parents and teachers should use and select for children offer the view that literature really are lenses. These researchers argue that parents and teachers, that as parents and teachers, we should select stories that mirror a child's identity, appearance, experience. By doing so, children are emotionally validated, that there is a place in the world for them, and that they are part of the global dialogue on making the world a better place. So this is one lens. These books provide children with the opportunity to see themselves, their own cultures, and the universal issues that they experience reflected back to them. They create a sense of rootedness in children that is so important in a global, transient world. The second lens would be as windows. We're encouraged to select books that introduce the world to children. These books are described as windows. They give children the opportunity to look through windows into the lives of others and to put themselves into the shoes of others with viewpoints and experiences that are different from their own. In this way, children appreciate the cultures of others, have empathy for a wide spectrum of people and the world that they live in. In this way, they join humanity that is part of the natural world. These writers say that they should have the opportunity to look through windows, right, to experience the world, even though they may not, right, have physical experiences. The third lens is sliding doors. That we should select literature for children that are sliding doors. These books are purely transformational. Through these books, children move through sliding doors and become engaged and often empowered to advocate and take action. An example I'm going to give you here is called The One and Only Ivan by Catherine Applegate, that has moved children to feel for caged animals and become vegetarians themselves, purely because of the experience in the story and something that they did not learn from either parents or their teachers, something that they actually gathered from the experience of reading the story. So yes, the whole language approach holds great promise for us to develop children as readers, and we should be encouraged to utilize it fully to complement more discrete, intensive reading experiences that we are all currently doing. Allow me to conclude by making these 4 assertions that we can all agree on. First, we want children to love reading, not just to be able to decode words on a page. Second, we want children to seriously consider reading as a viable leisure activity that they can do alone or with others. We want children to be empowered to view reading as important for lifelong learning by assessing multiple views of the world. And finally, we want them to read beyond the words, to prepare them for the lives ahead and to actualize and lead meaningful lives. We're going to have a workshop after this, and I really encourage you all to join us so that we can share how we brought in these principles into the Read Play program. Thank you.